It's another beautiful Monday, and we're super excited to be back here for another episode of the Musso podcast. We are your hosts, Jama, Hadi, and Dengone. And on this podcast, as usual, we share a microphone for fresh conversations on current affairs and women's realities beyond a single story. Thank you all so much for all of the feedback from the episodes. We're back again this week for another interesting conversation that we hope you all will join us in. But before we do that, the usual check-ins. I realize we never check in on you guys who listen to us. We're only here and going, how are you? Hadi, how are you? I'm good. And then we move on. So tell us how you're feeling. Tell us what you're looking forward to this week. We'll be super excited to hear what your goals are, and just, even if it is rest. I'm looking forward to all the people telling us that their goals for this week are rest. So over to you, ladies. What is this week looking like? I don't like the silence.
Work.
You're still working? I'm on break. I can't believe it.
Ha 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 ha.
Wow.
Must be great. Congratulations to you and your break.
People are feeling a bit salty in the studio today, but that's okay. Hadi, what's up?
I've been good, girl. It's been alright. These past few days I've been a little migraine heavy. So I've kind of spent most of my days in bed trying to relax it off. But apart from that, it's been okay so far.
How far are we from the 40
Let's not discuss
interviewers? Has it gone down, at least?
What has gone?
The number.
Ngoni, how are you doing?
Stress Republic is stressing me.
Oh, you're Stress Republic itself.
Yes.
I had somebody say, I don't know, I need to find the tweet. It was like, everybody in Gambia is stressed.
That's where I got the Stress Republic from. It's like, we
Wow.
should change the name of the country. And I totally agree. This country stresses me out every day to a point where I think I'm mentally checking out. I'm just here physically, and I think I've mentally checked out. Damaswana, tell mom, I'm not good. I'm tired.
So no, I'm good today. At
No,
least that's a
I'm
change.
good today. I'm tired. I'm tired of this country.
Everyone is stressed. I think a lot of people have mentally checked out.
Yeah.
And are just really existing, no longer living in the country. Such a shame.
I mean, but also I've been enjoying going to the trade fair. I think that's been one of the highlights. I was
But my pocket's not enjoying it. And I have a broke semester as well who's been draining my account.
Yeah, Hader.
It's my engineer. I've been getting house my hand, but she's going to pay me. I'm investing.
No, it's an investment, man.
Yeah, I've been enjoying my break. I
How long
can't
was your
believe
break
it.
for?
4 weeks. Ooh.
Oh, they gave you the 4 weeks.
When I got the approval, I was shouting and screaming in my room like, I can't believe it. I know I'll be doing a bit of work on the side, but it's just good to know I don't have to wake up in the morning and have to be in
or
the
have
office.
to do something.
Yeah. Anyways, we hope you all are doing well as well. Let us know. Hashtag is MussoPod on all social media platforms. Let us know how your week has been. That's MUSSOPOD. And I can hamudli Musso again.
Ngo is the spelling bee champion here. She's asking people to spell things.
So we're gonna go right into our topic for this week. So I think 2 episodes ago we were talking about the state of insecurity in the Gambia, and all of us really just talking about our fears of living here with all of the attacks that have been happening and all of that. And so today we are discussing a topic that's kind of related, or at least that people have been making links to with regards to insecurity in the country. And that's the issue of drug use or substance use, and even going further to abuse, and what could be the possible linkages to the increase in insecurity and attacks and violence that we're seeing in the country. And as usual, before we get into it, we share a quote that basically leads us into the conversation. And obviously on Musso, we say we're looking at things from a feminist perspective. And this is a quote from an article that we got from AWID, authored by Fenya Fischler. I hope I pronounced that right. And the quote goes, "Feminism calls on us to see the specific experiences of all women, including women who use drugs. Women face particular challenges because of the oppressive structures within which we live. For women who use drugs, their identities as women and people who use drugs are intertwined." So that's our quote for this week. And like we said, we're discussing drugs. First, what do we think about the quote? What are our initial thoughts?
For me, I would definitely say that drug use is a feminist issue, just the same way as sex work is, and the same way as sex education and all of that is. And it's important that we talk about it and stop, I guess, looking at it from a view of shame. So I'm so glad, like, because I was reading the article and I was so it was very spot on, and I'm so happy that, like, these things, even though, like, they're not discussed as much as they should be, are starting to come into the front lines, because there's so much stigma around drug use to begin with, but especially for women.
Yeah.
Because even stuff as small as smoking cigarettes, women are looked badly upon, let alone marijuana use or cocaine use and stuff of that sort. But it's like, if we don't talk about the fact that, like, women are drug users too, then if they need the help, where will they get the help from? So
we'll be digging into that, and I think it's interesting because then the feminism really is bringing all of these different lenses. We're looking at the gender perspective, the class perspective, so all of those many intersections. That's what we're trying to look at, and moving away from the very simplistic way. I think we usually talk about drug use or abuse in Gambia. Go, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I like the last part of the quote about women who use drugs and, you know, their identities as women and people who use drugs being intertwined, because generally when we think drug use or drug abuse, we tend to think men, but also that women who use drugs are seen as less of a woman, less than. So because of that, you don't get to be treated the same way as, you know, a person in need of help or a person in need of assistance if you're addicted to whatever substance you're using. So I like that she makes that connection, because really you can't deal with one without the other. Yeah,
it's a wholesome game. But before we get into the issue of the abuse itself, so obviously we have a resident expert, a psych major in the house, doctor to be,
and I'm just very passionate about drug use.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted you to just get us into, I guess, is it the psychology of drug use? What are the things basically that push people towards first trying to, because then getting to abuse is a journey. It gets to a point where you're heavily dependent on the substance for whatever reason. So just walk us through that psychology of
drug use.
The drug use in general.
A lot of the time, right? If you look at a lot of countries where there's high rates of drug use and drug abuse, it tends to do with economic reasons, where there's not much opportunities, people are bored, and so, especially with young people, that they don't feel like there's anything else going for them, so you end up resorting to drug use. Like, if you look at, there was this documentary I watched a while, so disclaimer, I'm very, very passionate about, like, you know, decriminalizing drug use and just stuff around drug use in general, and I tend to watch a lot of documentaries around it, and I think, I'm not sure if it was Uganda or one African country where they were addicted to, was it cough syrup? And with a lot of the time, what you hear is, we're bored, we don't have opportunities, we're not working. One person on that documentary was saying they hadn't worked in 2 years. So all they really had to do was use drugs. And I think, especially when you think about it in the Gambian context, we're seeing a place where it's like we're in constant economic recession, where young people are coming back from back way, or you're in menial jobs that are not paying enough. There's really not much going on for you, to the point where, like, you know, drug use seems to be the only option for you. I was also, I'm not sure if I read this or if I watched a TED talk on it, but there was this guy who was talking about an experiment that he was doing with rats when it came to I think it was cocaine use or something of that sort, and he had like two groups. One group was given actually it was one group, and so they had the option of either like just staying alone or going into the place where they had like cocaine in the water. And every time the rats would choose the cocaine in the water until they made like some kind of amusement park or theme for them where they had access to. So after that, like, you see that the patterns in drug use changed for the rats, where instead of always going towards the cocaine, they were going to other opportunities for them. And so again, it mimics just human nature, where it's like, if you have something else going for you, you won't necessarily feel the need to start using drugs, because it's like, it's not just addiction, but it's also about whether you have support, whether you have resources that will help you, whether you have something else to look forward to, and whether you have something to live for. Because a lot of the time, drug use it's a very lonely journey, And again, because of the stigma that's around it, you just assume that if no one's going to understand. So even if you're using, you're very discreet about it. So you won't, even if you do want to get help, you won't get the help that you need. And even if it's someone that doesn't want to stop using drugs, there's no harm reduction techniques where people are able to use drugs safely without harming themselves or anyone around them. But we'll go into that again when we talk about the kinds of drugs that are acceptable and the whole class issue around it. But I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yeah, it did. It's pretty interesting because I think, like you mentioned, a lot of the time it's like, oh, kimge use drug, kimge li yahuna and stuff. So a lot of stigma, a lot of social stigma that comes with people not trying to understand really what this. And you talk to a lot of people, they say it's a means of escape from the harsh realities that they have to deal with. So if you are high up there, you don't have to think about maybe you being hungry or having to deal with, depression or poverty, and just being reminded about being a failure, for example. We've talked about failure on this podcast before, and how all of us really are afraid of, failing, and each one of us has different ways of dealing with failure or with that fear of failure. And for some people, it is resorting to drugs. Any thoughts?
No, with Hadi speaking about, what pushes people into using drugs, all the situations she described are things that also lead people into depression and frustration. So you can see that there's also a link in your mental health, the state of your mental health, and what it pushes you to do sometimes to escape that. Because if you are from a very underprivileged background, like Hadi said, you don't have a job, your parents are struggling, you're struggling, that in itself, ñàkk xaalis rek daf la dee depress. Not having access to means of solving your problems in itself can lead to depression. Now, to escape that depression, and you don't just get into using drugs, you start by experimenting. And here, the reality of this country is a lot of people start experimenting on drugs in their early teenage years, when they're like 14, 15, especially with
even younger now.
Yeah, even younger, especially with younger boys. When they're in high school, perhaps they're struggling with school and everything else, or just normal peer pressure that leads them into, getting into substance abuse. You start trying weed or trying cigarettes and things, alcohol and things like that. And in like 3-4 years, you're already addicted, right? So it then becomes a cycle that's hard for you to get out of. And it also makes it harder to see light at the end of the tunnel, because all you see is poverty and what you're living in. And my boss always talks about how, I guess we'll get into this deeper later, but how there are certain crimes there are certain offenses in this country that criminalize poverty, basically. Because when you look at the root cause, it always comes down to poverty.
People being poor.
Yeah. Drug abuse in this country is largely pushed by poverty. It's always poverty that's behind it. So let's dig into that, because in Gambia we've seen different stories, right? We've had very recently the case of there was a lot of drugs or cocaine or whatever found at the ports, and then radio silence. Nobody knows what has happened with that case. There's not much information, but every day we're seeing on the police soap, bulk like a whole, I think 390 kilos of cannabis or whatever, So let's get into that, because obviously there's a classist angle to this. Who gets criminalized, who gets even when like they're, so for example we have the laws, yes, but then who gets the harder hits from the law, who gets to escape even when perhaps they're doing this on a larger scale, and dealing with even harder drugs. I was just going to say that from the number of years that I've been working within the law, like I've only been caught in about 2 years, but before that I've worked at the Justice Ministry as a clerk, and so I've been in the legal field for about
a long enough time.
2012 to now, that's like 9 years. That's 9 years that I've been in the system as a clerk and whatever. And in that, the one thing that I've observed is most of the people who are convicted for trafficking, drug trafficking, especially as with cannabis, when you go to court, they're mostly people from underprivileged backgrounds. I maybe, but I can't remember seeing someone from quote unquote like high middle class or whatever family in court for drug trafficking or drug possession. That doesn't mean that these people are not selling drugs or that they're not smoking it or using it. No, they are using it, and we all know this. But these people are rarely the ones who are caught by the law. Why? Because, like we said, there's a classist angle. If I'm from a privileged family, there's a very high chance that if I'm arrested with drugs, one person from my family or family friend or whatever would be able to bail me out.
The connections.
And the connections. You can work your connections and get out of the system. This is the reality of the country. This is not something that we're making up. You can get out of the system. And there's this thing where I think the punishment for being found with drugs or something, I think the fine is $1 million or some high figure like that.
For what kind of drugs, though?
For trafficking. For drug trafficking.
Oh, okay.
Just drug trafficking. I think
it doesn't matter what type of...
I'm not really sure on that, but the ones I've seen have mostly been cannabis, weed, and for that, I think the fine is about 1 million or something like that, in default 10 years imprisonment. So if I'm from a well-to-do family, if I'm convicted, even there's a very high chance that my parents or my family members can put up that amount of money, and I'll walk away. But if you're from an underprivileged family, you're straight going to mile 2. You're going to mile 2 straight away. And I have this conversation with boys I know, and I say to them that you're from a poor family. If you get arrested with drugs, that's the end of you. You're going to go to jail for maybe 5-10 years. That's it for you, because you don't have that access, that social capital to get out of it. So there's that classist angle to it, where the implementation 95 or maybe 99% of the time only falls on people from underprivileged backgrounds. And the reason that these people are actually engaged in selling drugs is because they're trying to make a living, right? So not justifying it, but that's the reason.
Yeah, just before coming back to Hadi, so you mentioned the fine or the alternative, which is serving jail time. Because I remember an old friend that was in remand and came up like, everybody, well, the bulk of the people in remand are caught for these petty crimes. Yeah. So they don't even get to, so they can be in remand for like 2, 3, 4 years, and they're not even getting to court. It's not like they've been sentenced to any prison terms whatsoever. Is this also like what we see from your experience and from what you've seen? Is it like what we have seen as well with, high profile people, well-to-do, connected people, when they have their cases?
No, generally, that's the thing. Because like I said before, we have this thing where a lot of our offenses criminalize poverty. Petty theft, you go, you're sent to remand and you're in jail. Maybe for the next 1 year, 2 years, your case would not proceed. We've seen cases where maybe the person or the complainant involved is a well-connected person, and the case is taken to court, prosecuted, and in a matter of days the thing is over. Meanwhile, there are people who are in remand for a year, 5 years maybe, and their cases have still not been completed. So you have that person waiting in court because, one, they can't afford a lawyer that's going to bail them out. The National Legal Aid Office is overworked, so they cannot really, honestly, they cannot handle all the cases. So you're there, you're just languishing there because you do not have the financial ability to deal with these things. Whereas, if we're being honest, it's a whole different case for someone from a middle-class family or from a well-to-do family. You are put on remand. Your family can afford a lawyer who will fight tooth and nail to get you out on bail, and then you go out until your case is until your case is finished. But if you are not that connected or you don't have that access to social capital, that's the end of it. You're just waiting. The courts, their dockets are full. The legal aid lawyers, they have too much on their plate, and they can't they don't have enough staff. Under-resourced and understaffed to handle all of those cases. So you're just there, the hariala. Like, that's why when you go, actually, prison officers have said that when we talk about prison overcrowding, it's actually at the remand wing. Yeah. That's why we have overcrowding, because that's where you have all these hundreds of people waiting for their cases to end. And because we criminalize poverty, like I said, petty offenses like petty theft and things like that, minor offenses for which you should be out on bail, you are there in prison waiting.
Okay. Yeah. So I just want to say that with a lot of, I think we all know a major drug dealer or two, number one. And
I don't.
Sure about that?
I mean, there were those big names that people would always hear in the country.
Hear them, that everyone knows because they're in cahoots with the police. Yeah, I just want to. Okay, so I feel like we all know at least one drug dealer or two major names. And the irony also that is not lost in me is the fact that, like, if we know it, obviously the police know it, obviously everyone else. Because it's like, for, now how, like, there's so... Oh, also I found out that we're making cocaine in the Gambia now. not just cocaine, ecstasy, Molly, and which leads me back to the fact that like with ecstasy, with Molly, which are pills, you can easily get away with transporting them because police is doing less stop you can just tell them, oh, this is aspirin or this is headache medication and get away with it. And so these high class drugs that people from the upper echelon are using are not going to be easily detected. So which leads back to Ngone's point about this criminalization in itself being something that's for the poor and not necessarily for richer drug users. And also I'm just thinking about the fact that like a lot of drug dealers, like the major ones that we know, have criminal records outside of the country, but then they come home and are still able to continue doing what they're doing without the law being involved. And anyway, I always say drug use is not a criminal justice issue. It is absolutely not, and it's something that the police need to stay away from. Because I'm thinking about so Portugal was the only country that's like decriminalized drug use, and this is from like trying to fight the war on drugs for like almost a decade with no end in sight. Because in the 90s they had pretty sure he was a dictator because he ruled for like 40 years, and like Portugal had no access to outside of the country. You couldn't even drink Coke. So,
Coca-Cola?
Yeah, it was really bad. So after that, when he was ousted, they were all of a sudden open to the world. So that added an influx of drug use. Like it was non-stop, like over hundreds of people were overdosing a day. So they tried criminalization, they tried doing so many things to stop it. So this is like all of the 90s. And then finally in 2000, they decided to decriminalize drug use. So from that decriminalization, like everything just went down. And it's honestly one of the most holistic approaches that I've ever seen to drug use. Like, well, it is ever in the world. Because not only selling is criminal, but using is not criminal. So if you're caught with drugs, like you'll basically just go and talk to someone and they'll see if you need help or not. And if you need help, if you are an addict, they'll take you to, what's it called? Rehab. They'll take you to rehab. They'll ensure that you're getting the help that you need, help you get a job after that. They have a needle exchange program where they'll give you new needles and all of that to use safely. Because again, it's not a criminal issue. I'm saying all of this to basically make people understand that it's a public health issue, not a criminal issue. And once people have the help that they need, the reliance on drugs is less, and also they can use safely, because simply using drugs is not harmful. So I know people are listening thinking maybe I'm like a huge proponent of drug use.
No, but it's important that we look at all of these different angles, because I feel like we usually look at it from a single point. It's bad, and stop it.
It's so bad. Like I think, was it 2 years ago, I lost a friend of mine to drug use. And I was older than him at that point, and I think he succumbed. It was heroin that killed him. But I remember, like, how our community is. Everyone's so judgmental. Everyone's, like, doing the whole... Like, I feel like if he had the help that he needed, and if people were actually there for him versus, like, just seeing everyone that's on drugs as a lost cause, and as someone that's just automatically bad and criminal, there's so many lives that we would not lose. So even, like, the whole drug use in itself, criminalizing drug use, is such a huge economic loss, and it's a loss to humanity, and there's so many things. And back to Portugal again, criminalization. I just want to add this one part. At this point, I think their budget for policing
in general,
when it comes to drug use, is 10% of the budget, and then about 70 something goes towards services. And I implore all of you to just go read about it. If you want to find out more, tweet us on Musso and I can send you links. Because the way the country changed from just being more empathetic and seeing people as people who need help versus seeing people as wayward and lost, it made such a tremendous, tremendous difference.
So we'll dig deeper into the issue of stigma, especially how it manifests in Gambian society, with especially the young people who are using drugs, who are using addictive substances, I guess. This also includes alcohol. But we're just going to go for a quick break at this point, and when we come back, the conversation will continue. If you have any thoughts, you can share them with us. The hashtag is MussopOD, MUSSOPOD. We'll be right back after the break. This is the Musso podcast, in case you've forgotten, in the short time that we took a break. On this episode, as a reminder, we're discussing the issue of substance abuse and the linkages that people are making to the state of insecurity in the Gambia. And before the break, we had just basically talked about the psychology of drug use, and this also includes alcohol use. The journey towards abuse, what are the different factors that should be taken into consideration that are not usually, and the whole issue of criminalizing drug use. Who does it affect the most? Who gets to go off because they're well-to-do, they're privileged? Again, if you have any contributions you would want to make, we're super happy to connect with you and engage. So yeah, obviously it's a Musso podcast, right? And we say we're looking at things from a gender perspective. In the first half, we were talking about the issue of women using drugs. And I think our quote of the week also summarized it very well for us. We see in the Gambia, obviously, even with cigarettes, when women smoke, it's stuff they to kida for bun. We've also seen cases where people even simply dismiss you or conclude that you're a sex worker because, the sex workers are the ones who smoke cigarettes because it's a part of their lifestyle. They're the ones who drink alcohol as well because it's a part of their lifestyle. What are our thoughts around this? Because we see a lot of shaming. It happens with everyone, men, women, everywhere. But then with women, there's that extra layer of shame, of stigma, of pointing fingers and just completely dismissing you as a bad person when you indulge in drug use of whatever form.
I think in the Gambia, it comes down to the fact that as a woman, we've talked about this before, where if you're a woman, there's a certain criteria or whatever that you're supposed to fit in. It's a mold that you're supposed to fit in. And if you're doing anything outside of that mold, then you're seen as a bad person and not worthy of attention or not worthy of love or anything. So I think this in itself fuels addiction for women who experiment with drugs. Because if I start, example, smoking weed, of course I'm hiding it. If I get to a point where I'm addicted to it, it would be more difficult for me to seek help than it would be for an average man. Because for a man to be addicted to it, that's something that, you can flaunt. That's it. But if you're a woman and you have a substance abuse issue or you're addicted to a certain substance, then you find it very hard to seek help. And you also are very likely not going to even see it as addiction that you need help. Remember a few months ago, I was at a nail salon at a certain part of town. And there were some women there, very young women, and they were speaking. And one of them was like, "Oh, yesterday I saw your neighbor at this particular place. Oh, she was the one who even gave me the stuff." So at first I was like, wait, what are they talking about? Because I was like, to me it was a shock because I've never seen or heard young women speak so openly about drug use. They didn't mention drugs, but the way they were speaking, you could tell that's what they were talking about. And the other one was like, "So did you take some?" She was like, "Yeah, when I was even coming, I was mangi wansiko. I was way up there." So that was a shock to me. I was so shocked. I didn't look up because I was like, it would be so awkward if I start staring at them. But I think I may have tweeted about it. I was like, wow, like, okay, we really, really have a drug problem in this country if it has gotten to a point where young women are openly talking about it. Because if you're a young woman and you're using drugs, there's a very high chance that you would hide it. But if it's at a point where you're comfortable to talk about it, then we have a serious, a very serious drug issue. And I think even in the way that I reacted to it, I may have, if I had said something, I would have shamed them. Yeah, I would have I would have shamed them unknowingly or unintentionally, just because of the way we're all trained. This is something that's in us. It's something that it pops out without you even realizing it. And even in the way that I've discussed it with other people, it was with the angle of shaming them, that like, you know, these young women are actually using drugs. Like, why are they using drugs? Instead of looking at the angle of how did they even access drugs?
Point, yeah.
What help can we give to these people?
No, I have something to add, because even with the stigma that we're talking about now, assuming that they're addicts versus recreational users is also stigmatic.
Yeah.
Because we've just assumed that, oh my god, this person is wayward because they're using drugs, so they have to be addicted to it. Versus, you know, the fact that not all drug use is versus not all drug use is addictive at all. And especially if your brain and the way you're wired and stuff, you're not necessarily someone with an addictive personality, then recreational drug use is in itself recreational drug use, and it's not an addiction. And so seeing it as an addiction instantly and pitying someone because you see them using drugs and automatically feeling bad for them, you don't realize it, but you're showing that you have some kind of moral high ground by not partaking in the same vices that they're partaking in. And we all have our vices. So I just wanted to add that, because I see that, I mean, I'm guilty of it too, but I see it in a lot of conversations, especially, and again, it's a feminist issue because of stuff like this. Because you think that, you know, especially if you're an activist, a feminist activist, you're fighting for all these different things, but you don't. It's like sex work again. I link drug use and sex work quite a lot because they have the same stigmas going for them. Because you can be someone that's, you know, that's smart, that's empowered, that knows what decisions to make, and still, you know, still be a drug user or still partake in sex work. Because, and I'm not even saying that because you partake in sex work then you're not smart or anything of that sort, but you can make the choice to do that. What again, it's about the safety of how you're using. No, people are really going to be like, they're really going to be like, this woman is advocating for drug use.
No, but what you're saying is right, because the comparisons that you're making, there's also an example of in Senegal, right next door, where they decriminalized sex work. And in a matter of years, they were able to lower the newly infection rates of HIV, because now sex workers can openly go to a hospital, declare themselves as sex workers, get the help that they need, get regular checkups and things like that. And they register. And this also it also protects them from abuse and things like that. So
and it's the same, because drug use is also pretty rampant among sex workers. So both of them, again, they go hand in hand, like so much that it's very hard to talk about one without talking about the other. Because I think even if you, like the Senegal example of decriminalizing sex work, that helps these sex workers get the help that they need, especially when it comes to any kind of help that they need. So maybe the burden or the stress that you would have of, oh, I can't get a checkup, or I can't get this, you know, I can't get condom use, or I can't report if I'm abused by a client, that might lead to drug use. That's lessening. So because that's lessening, you know, there's less worry, and you can go ahead and do your job, aka the oldest job in the book, aka the job that we need to stop pretending that we're so morally against,
especially when we're using them and seeking the services.
We're not only seeking the services, where, you know, porn is very rampant.
All our relationships are transactional, and sex work is a transactional
it's a bigly transactional relationship. So we need to stop pretending that, like, you know, we have this moral high ground above so many different classes of people. And I think especially like with feminists and feminist activists, it's so important that we lay the space and the foundation to discuss these things, because women are affected a lot. I'm thinking about the fact that, like, drug use, there's a two-part factor in it. If women who use drugs are most likely to be abused, you know, sexually violated, or be in domestic violence situations, and then there's the fact that their partners who are drug users are also more likely to abuse them. So it's something that we can't shy away from, and it's something that we really need to start thinking about how to tackle.
So many intersections. And that's why it's important we dig into all of them, because that one lens is really not doing any good to anyone at all, the society as a whole, but also the people who are directly affected by these issues.
There's one issue that people bring up, and I think it's very interesting. I've heard a few people say or ask why alcohol is legal and drugs are illegal when they ultimately, when used in an abusive way, in excess, they all have the same effect. So how come we have normalized use of one and criminalized the use of the other? Yes, Hadi, that question is for you.
No, it goes back to the whole class thing. I'm going to give an example for America, right? So in America, before, like, opiates are now there's a war on, opioids and stuff like that, but before it was accepted because guess who are using it? Middle class, women, middle class white women and middle class white men. It's the same for cocaine, but crack cocaine, which is very similar to regular cocaine, is illegal because it's been linked to black people. Not just illegal, but it's been made seem like the more harmful drug. Same as heroin, same as weed. Of all drugs, same as weed, that they've linked to, just being bad. And it's linked to blackness, and it's just linked to other racist stereotypes. So with a lot of these, alcohol is the same thing too. If more white people were overdosing and dying from alcohol, and also the economic aspect too, whatever they can, whatever they can tax and do it in a way that they can get more money out of it, then they'll go ahead and make it available and okay. So it's a very, very, very racist system, and again it links back to capitalism and all of that stuff.
And I also think when in terms of decriminalization, when something is decriminalized or when something is legal, then it's easy to control it, right? If let's say importation of cannabis were legal, hypothetically, if it were legal in the Gambia, then whoever is importing it in the Gambia would go through a certain process. Then you will know who's bringing what quantity. But now, because it's illegal, people are smuggling it. Smuggling it into the.
It's been a while since we heard that.
People are smuggling it into the country, and that then also, I think it's a huge economic loss for the state, honestly.
Talking about economic loss. So we have a presidential aspirant
who I'm voting for.
Yeah, because I was so Hadi, you had mentioned distinguishing between addiction and recreational use, but I think the one aspect that people don't even talk about here, I mean, a few people have, it's for medicinal use, right? Yeah. And I know quite a few people who've been pushing that, especially with the Jinak weed farms or whatever happens there. And we have a presidential aspirant. This is not his platform, because I think just yesterday I saw on Facebook him clarifying to say this is not a conversation he started. He was asked about it, and I think it's also from the point of, he's a Rasta person or he's a Rasta man, so let's ask him about the weed. And so he was responding from his position, and he was talking about the economic value it could bring to the country if we could look at other countries that have made it work. Because it's not a case of Gambia is going to trial it for the entire world. It's already been trialed in other places, and they're seeing what positive impact it has. Also with regards creating employment, when you look at unemployment, is back again to everything that we've been talking about as a root source of some of the reasons why people resort to drug use for release. And so, I'm still waiting to see what his policy plans are and really just understand what his program is. But I know this is something that it sounds radical. But again, we're talking about the social stigma, and it could be a reason why people are like, legalize. So we're not going to legalize drug. And
the funny thing is, I raised this issue with someone who's a friend of his, and the person said to me, he didn't even say that he was going to decriminalize. Yeah. He said that if it were something that was, he would support it. Like he supports the idea.
I actually watched that part of the press conference, and he was giving the examples of the different countries and how they were able to make it work. So it's not even a platform for him, but everything you're getting from the media, from social media, is he is pushing for the legalization of cannabis.
Yeah, we need to sensationalize, and people run with it and sensationalize it and just misinterpret everything. That wasn't what he said. He just said that him personally, he's in support of decriminalizing it. And like, you go into our supermarkets, we have all these hemp shampoo, hemp hair conditioner, hemp seed, blah blah blah, all of that. That hemp is the Thai that we criminalized here in this country.
Hemp is fancy naming.
It's a fancy name for it, and we're importing all of these things and paying money for it when we have the raw material to make for it. And I've also spoken to someone who smokes weed. And the person said that actually the type that we have in the Gambia isn't the one that makes you crazy or, makes you lose your senses. That it's actually a milder version. That the one that, that people use that gets them to a state of serious addiction is actually the ones that are imported into the country.
Or not that only. Some of them are laced.
Yeah. That too.
They're laced,
So if there's there's decriminalization and that no one can speak English here today. Oof, Lord. If there's decriminalization and then there's like actually regulating of what's being sold and what's government approved and what's not in the streets, then there's gonna be cleaner weed options and stuff that is less harmful to your health and less addictive and so many other things. So yeah.
So I guess we're all for decrim.
Me personally.
Because the world really, criminal laws around the world, especially for Gambia.
Criminal legislation is meant for poor people.
Relics of colonialism, and those are things that we don't talk about, because a lot of these laws are from colonial periods.
And then they're repealing these laws.
And we're still stuck in holding them. And what's funny is we're always, these laws are here to protect our cultures. When it's the very people who came to break our cultures that brought in these laws. So I think the conversations really, really need to happen. And what we are saying, I guess what we're getting from this whole thing is criminalization is not always a solution. And it's not just for drug use. It's for all of these crimes that people are thrown in jail for, especially in a country like Gambia where prisons are not really about rehabilitation. No. They're not about reform. It's all about punishment. You come out, if you do come out, it's having to start all over again. No skills, nothing at all. So that's a conversation. Something we need to keep talking about, something that we need to dig into. But if not criminalization, then what?
Well, this is why I'm a big fan of abolition also. And just the minute we focus on decriminalization, we will be able to divert our resources to things that are actually going to improve the lives of people. Instead of the 10 police hitting one person because they're on a drug-induced psychosis, why are we not investing more in researchers or even paying for people to go study psychology and psychiatry to be able to come back home and deliver the care? Or even with the amount of social workers and nurses we have, why are we not opening rehab centers that are focused on that? With when we cut down with the police, because there's way too many police in this country who are not doing any jobs, so they find it useful to just take people in for no reason. But if you're giving them actual jobs that are helping benefit people's lives in terms of making sure that they're trained to deal with drug users better and all of that, then you're actually putting them towards better service versus always making them look like the enemy. There's investing in the people, taking that money and actually investing in the drug users themselves. So developing rehab facilities, but facilities that are teaching people how to go back into the work that they're in, or how to start new career paths. What is there to offer post drug use? Because I know I've heard certain times where people are addicted to drugs, and then their family, because we have no rehab centers, their family members take them to jail for a month, because that's supposed to serve as rehab. But then with that, with something like that, the reuse rate is really high, because you're not giving people the help that they need. So instead of spending so much money trying to arrest every person, trying to do this, trying to do that. I remember last week at the trade fair, I saw like 3 police with some guy that clearly looked high, and they were dragging him. And it looked, it was so violent, where violence does not need to be the solution for stuff like this, when we can, put our tax dalasi into something that will power the economy in the long run. It's sad that I'm sounding so capitalistic by always going back to the economy versus, obviously we're doing things because humans are humans and they deserve rights and they deserve to live happy, healthy, fulfilled lives. But also, our governments are capitalist institutions, and maybe if we focus on the economic perspective, they will be more likely, to do something for it. And I think it's so important that we also find studies around drug use in the country. So even if it's, qualitative studies with people who are using drugs as to what they need, or just research around what the percentage of drug use is, because we're so quick to just be like, I'm not he was high, I'm not ugly until this happened, without really knowing the number of people that are using drugs at an addictive level and what can be done for them to ensure that they're not they're not repeating the same offenses that they're repeating.
I think another point around so the story you shared about the guy at the trade fair just got me thinking around who we also have sympathies for when these things happen. So when there's that violence, obviously they're violating the rights of that person because they're inflicting violence on them, potentially harming them. But the reactions usually are just, oh, Tyler, they used to cut it. So you're labeling them, and because that's how we all see them as a society, you don't think that they're deserving of humane treatment. You don't think that they're deserving of enjoying their rights. And so everybody just folds their hands and leaves it as na policy deal ak nyom. It happens even in our neighborhoods when they do the raids that they do, jumping people, hitting them and inflicting a lot of violence, sometimes even hurting them, and nothing happens.
Killing them.
Because everybody thinks, oh, they're trying to get rid of this menace in our community or in our attack, and again, it comes back to the points we were making in that episode around the insecurity on retaliation or protection, or what is it, self-defense. So we always feel like, oh, the police are doing this for us, but then we're not thinking, what if it were us? What if the police were also, it's human beings, they have the rights are being violated. But I think how we see people who use drugs also really has an impact on how we sympathize or empathize with them when they face the law, or when the law deals with them in a way that actually violates their basic rights.
Absolutely.
Our lawyer.
No, first, I agree with Hadi about abolition. What's it called? Okay. I'll first talk about the prisons and the rehabilitation, lack of rehabilitation. I think, to give the devil its due, right now they're trying to kind of shift towards that, because even with the Prisons Act that's being amended, they're trying to look at enforcing non-custodial measures. So this is going to be in line with the criminal code and the criminal procedure code as well, so that for certain misdemeanors, small offenses, you don't necessarily get to go to prison. You do something like community service, or after a few years you'd be let out on parole or probation and things like that. And also, I also learned that even in the prison system itself, they have people coming in to teach some of the prisoners some skills and things like that. So the amount of funding that the prison service has to do this at a larger scale now, that's the issue. But they're actually, doing that small scale. So we have to give them, they do that. They're trying small. But there's also the thing where in this country, we're normally not ready to invest in things that are going to bring revolutionary change, right?
Nobody wants the revolution.
Yeah, nobody wants the revolution. So we know that, okay, giving the prison service, for example, a machine that gets to do full body scans instead of, putting your hands in somebody's body cavities and things like that to do a search, is going to protect that person's right, to privacy and things like that. But then, are we willing to invest those millions of dollars into that kind of machine, or hundreds of thousands of dollars? No, we say, oh, we can't afford that. Government, we don't tend to look at the larger scale or the bigger picture. We just look at now. Right now, we can't afford it. But we also live in a country where if 10 of us from the government needed to travel to China for a 2-day meeting, we will have the money to fund that. That fund would be available, but we're not ready to invest funds in changing our structures, changing our laws, changing the institutions that are responsible for implementing the laws, especially the prisons. The prisons is so severely underfunded, and that is where you find a lot of these people who are convicted for drug use, people who are arrested for trafficking drugs or using drugs. They end up in the prison system on remand for years or for months or years. And then if they're convicted, they're also there for 10 years or so. Meanwhile, that place is in such a derelict state that so are we even willing to invest in these systems? And abolition also begins from one place: dismantling or fixing the root cause of the problem. We can't abolish or decriminalize drug use if we don't fix the problem we have in this country, that's poverty. If we don't fix poverty, then you're just wasting time. We're just wasting our time, our resources, because we're just going to be going around in circles. You're going to have more poor people being engaged in the same thing. Why? Because their socioeconomic status is pushing them into doing that. And I also liked how Jama talked about rights violations, because in some of these arrests and detentions and things like that, your rights are violated. You're arrested for drug trafficking. You're poor. You don't have any lawyer to help you out or anyone to bail you out. You're going to be languishing in jail for a week or more.
So that's beyond the 72 hours.
That's beyond the 72 hours. Legal, you're going to be there waiting for them to take you before a court to press charges. And even then, you have a right to bail, but then you don't know how to apply for bail. So you're just going to be there on remand. And aside from that, the 72 hours and things like that, the procedure in arresting you, the torture, it could be someone who's not even resisting arrest that much. But imagine 3 people arresting one person.
That's already not
is that
able
reasonable
to do
force?
anything,
The other day too, I was at trade fair and I saw two. I think one was a paramilitary officer, and the other was a plainclothes officer. The paramilitary officer was carrying, the rifles that they carry, and the plainclothes officer, and they were dragging someone towards the back as well. And this guy was being held by the chest. I don't know how to say that in English. But and they were dragging him away. And these are basic things that happen in arrest procedures. They're going to hit you for just merely resisting. And it's normal for people to resist. So the amount of resistance, is it... what's it called? The amount of force you're using, does it commensurate with the amount of resistance that you're facing from the person?
It never does.
Yeah. Are you in any form of threat that you would actually need to use violence against that person? And also your normal right to privacy. I'm walking down the streets. I don't look suspicious in any way. I don't look like a criminal suspect. Why are you stopping me to search me?
What does a criminal look like?
Yeah, they just look at you and just profile you. Especially if you have locks.
Oh yeah,
that's it for you. The people with locks, especially men with locks in this country, you walk past them and they automatically assume that you use weed and whatever hard substance. Meanwhile, you could be someone called Hannah. You don't even smoke cigarettes, but you're profiled and you're harassed and everything. So, yeah, there's a lot of issues that come with criminalization, but it would not work unless we fix our problem in this country, and that's poverty.
We're a long way away.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the people in charge are actually interested in fixing that or treating people as human beings in this country. But I think the general consensus here is we need to look at care services again. What care services are available for people to go seek help? What initiatives or incentives are there such that people don't turn to drugs or turn to alcohol as a way of release, as a way of freedom from their predicaments and the challenges and the struggles that they're facing? And even within our families, what support do we provide for people in the family? Because we see families where you start smoking and they kick you out of the house.
Yeah.
There's no support whatsoever. Already, you're banished. You're out of it. Nobody has any respect for you. You're of no value. You failed completely. And so you find safety in communities where other people are using. And so that becomes your daily activity. So I don't know who's listening to this, who has the power to initiate that change. Because I think Tanka is the one place that everyone is taken, and nobody even knows what resources are available there to deal with the different kinds of challenges that people are facing.
There's none. There's Well, let me not. From what I remember from like a year or two ago, they had like 2 different medications that they usually gave to patients. One was for schizophrenia and another one was basically kind of like a tranquilizer.
For everyone.
Yeah. No, but it's sad because from what I remember, I don't know about now, but we had one psychiatrist in this entire country. Maybe it's more now, but that was what it was. And there's no help. Yeah. Is basically all I want to say. There's no help at all, and I commend Tanganyika, of course, for having that space where like Lumbon you're accepted within the, and you're not roaming the streets, and whatever little help you're getting is better than what you would have gotten outside, especially when your family deserts you. But we need to support institutions like that, and we need to support more people who are doing the work with very limited stigma attached to it and just helping for the sake of helping versus just sitting down and being judgmental about drug use and stuff like that.
Perfect way to get into.
It seems as if also, sorry, before you get that, maybe things, I think we have a lot of young people who are also getting into this because a few weeks or days ago, I saw Mam Oli. I think she's a psychiatrist, right? Or mental health professional in the UK, and I saw her tweet something about trying to do something for Tanka with other professionals that she's working with, and if we have help like that, I think it would make it would be of great use, because you see someone walking down the streets, they're obviously high, and people are like, "Ki weru ki dafa living daf ki dofla," and I'm like, "Dafa wa ki," like I'm like, they're not mentally ill. They're just high on something, and if they have the help they need for a certain period, they'll be fine.
But also, there's the whole. Even though some of them are not mentally ill, again, this comes back to the quality of drugs that we're using, or like what kind of brain chemistry you have. You could go into drug-induced psychosis, and we see that a lot in the country too. Because a lot of people, like, it's, certain drug use one time or twice and then you're done for. So that's also something else that we need to address, which we can address through decriminalization.
Decriminalization is the word. And so we're talking about the people who are doing something. As little as it may seem, it's a drop in the pool or a drop in the ocean. But even if it's making a difference in the life of one person, that's a difference that we should commend. And it's the perfect time to get into everyone's favorite segment, the Musso of the week. So take it away, Hadi.
So this week's Musso, she's a very good friend of mine. Love her very much, but I'm going to stay away from that bit and just focus on her merits as a really, really, really brilliant young woman. So our Musso for this week is Ejike, aka the founder of Forward for You. If you don't know, Forward for You is an organization in the Gambia that does a lot around mental health, especially in destigmatizing what someone that's mentally ill looks like. So it's a lot of conversations around it, raising funds for Tanka specifically in terms of renovation, in terms of food. Even this past Eid, there was a clothing drive for for the patients there to have Eid clothes. And it's remarkable that in a country that thrives off of being conservative, there's organizations like this that are making it easier to talk about mental health. So if this conversation today has interested you, I would recommend reaching out to Educate and Forward for You and seeing ways in which you can help. And they can, because they have links to Tanka, they can tell you what's needed and how to go forward from there. Or if you have expertise that you also want to share, with them, please reach out. Educate is a wonderful person for doing this, and even the Forward for You staff too. Thank you for all the amazing work that you do. Like I said, she's definitely someone that I admire, not just as a really smart woman, but she's also a friend and a sister. And so shout out to you for being awesome and being our Musso this week.
Yeah, and I think one thing I want to point out about the team that I really love is the ethical use of media.
Oh, yes.
Because that's something that I'm really passionate about. And people don't want to hear it. But they are very, very ethical in the way that they... So, people usually talk, we're running a charity, people are donating their money. We need to show them where the money is going. Showing your donors where the money is going doesn't mean taking pictures that reveal the identities of vulnerable people and putting it out there. And I love how you see that it's a whole team thing. It's not just a one person thing. It's the whole team that's conscious of the fact that we're providing this support. We're already in a position of power over these people because we're bringing support to them, and they're already looking to us as, so even if we were to go into the consent issue, if you ask them, they would just say yes, because in that moment, they receive. But I see how they go the extra mile to just make sure they respect the dignity of the people that they're helping, and they really do service from a very, very ethical point, and that's something that I really, really appreciate about them. So yeah, Musso of the Week, Ajigay, sending you a lot of love. Like Hadi said, reach out and support Forward for You. A lot of wonderful work being done with little resources, so put the resources there. This time we're not asking for money from Musso. We're asking you to support.
Musso cares about this.
Yeah. So we're asking you to support Forward for You. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ajigay, for your service. As you said, I love Forward for You and the way they do things, and I just wish them great things. So I think this brings us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for staying on with us up till now. We appreciate you, dedicating your time and your energy and everything to the Musso podcast. We're truly grateful. And if this topic is something that you're interested in and you want to share your feedback and comments or questions, of course, you know how to do that. Reach out to us on our social media platforms.
Yep. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. You can't miss us at all. And if you want to share private thoughts as well, our DMs are open. Our emails are on the profiles as well. You can send us an email and we can carry this forward. If you also would like to get connected to Forward for You, we can also facilitate that. Hadi had mentioned if you wanted links to the resources as well, we're happy to provide those for you. So we're going to call it a day. But just before we do that, a very big thanks, as usual, to Ibu Jaite, Right Click, for producing this podcast with us free of charge, and doing this week in, week out, and making sure we're able to bring you really good quality content. Sending a lot of love to our two Aisatus as well. Aisatu Jalo, Aisatu Suare. So IJ and Ida Susie. Sending a lot of love to you, our Mussos, for taking this journey with us and making sure the podcast is accessible to people who wouldn't traditionally be able to listen to it. So let's hear your thoughts. Until we come back next Monday, it's bye.